This video is brought to you by the lovely guys over at RoboToys. For all your Hasbro, Takara, third-party and knockoff desires, RoboToys has you covered. For 10% off, use the code DrLockdown 10% off at the checkout. Now on to today's diagnosis.
Read the disclaimer! On the other one, you bastard!
With the cancellation of the original IDW continuity, and with IDW's shift to more toy-accurate designs, Iron Factory has kinda had its aesthetic pulled out from under them, so a change is required. Granted, because Iron Factory actually puts their own spin on the IDW characters as well as just doing them accurately, it's not that much of an aesthetic difference, but it has to be made going forward. Previously we got a taste of what's to come with Hound, and honestly, with how well he was done, I'm very excited for what we're gonna get going forward. But from this point, where to? Where can the company trajectory go from here? Well, we know that we're getting several figures in the style of Hound with their Power Glide and the Heralds of Unicron, and they all look pretty good. And then there's also that Gajinka Starscream, but I don't know if that's cancelled or not. I'm pretty sure it is though. And then the most left field of the lot, reimagining classic characters as samurai. Greetings Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to Iron Factory EX-45,
Yoroi Shishimaru!
Also known as Lio Convoy. Fun fact, Yoroi Shishimaru translates to Armored Lion. Can't accuse them of overthinking names now, can ya? So Lio Convoy has always been in somewhat of a weird limbo of popularity and obscurity in the West. In Japan, he's got a reasonable fan base, as evidenced by him replacing Alpha Trion on the Takara Legends release, as well as the recent Masterpiece figure. As far as the West is concerned, though, most of the time he's relegated to redeco status as an easy cash grab, because they can market it as an Optimus Prime, and kids love Optimus Primes. Also, did you know that the current world record holder for the largest Transformers collection counts third-party figures in his collection, and he referred to Perfect Effects' Lio Convoy as Optimus Prime? I mean, I love third-party, but as far as world records go, that's a load of rubbish. Hope a certain Aussie knocks that record out in due time. But anyway, given that third party has a very large presence in China as well as the West, I suppose it's no surprise that Lio Convoy was given a figure in the increasingly weird Iron Factory lineup. And in Lion mode, I can't help but get a feeling of deja vu, back to a time when Iron Factory alternate modes weren't as well thought out. Don't get me wrong, there are some elements that look absolutely stunning, but at the same time, others are a smidge messy. But first off, the good, and there is a lot of it. The first thing you're going to notice is the head, and sweet Jesus, this is amazing. Without a doubt, this blows the water out of any Lio Convoy head I personally own, and honestly, looking at the other options on the market, I think it looks better than those too. For starters, this sculpt work is absolutely stunning, especially in the face itself. There are so many lines and ridges that give him one of the meanest beast face sculpts of 2020. You look at this in comparison to the Masterpiece, and honestly, I don't feel there's any contest. Granted, one's going for a toon-accurate aesthetic, but let's be real here, toon accuracy is kinda shit. Now, some of the detail does tend to get washed out by the white plastic, but thankfully you still get a ton of paint to pick up the slack. I love how the gold doesn't just coat the helmet itself, but it creates a sort of nose line on the sides. And hot damn, those piercing pink eyes really work for this design. Honestly, I don't know why a lot of figures just go for boring old red and blue. There's the whole neon color spectrum at the deco designer's disposal. Use it! The remaining details on the helmet are also done exceptionally well. These side parts, which I don't know the names for since I'm not a historian, effortlessly bulk up the silhouette. Yes, from the back they do look a little bit empty, but considering how tiny this thing is, I don't think it's worth getting frustrated over. And here's a really neat detail, the crest is actually the matrix of leadership. Me, that's a clever design. Moving back, the lion's mane has been reinterpreted as traditional samurai armor, which does an alright job of covering up the robo bits on the inside, although it isn't perfect. Still, the gold paint juxtaposed with the gunmetal robo kibble really helps draw your attention away from the imperfections left over from the not quite perfect engineering. It's smart deco design, which in cases like these goes a long way to making things acceptable. Although, quick note, my copy wasn't glued in properly and one of them fell off. I was able to fix it prior to reviewing this guy though, and I don't feel it's fair to judge the figure poorly due to one annoying QC issue. The gold continues on the shoulder pads, which happen to be the hip skirts from the robot mode. This is a very smart choice and helps tie in the samurai aesthetic into the lion mode. That kind of sculpting also continues to the back of the beast mode, so you're not just getting random samurai parts plonked onto a traditional bulky bestial robot. No, this case is really well thought out. Same goes for the legs. Well, at least the front ones. Them being the arms is nothing new, however, for robot arms to work in beast mode, they have to be incredibly posable. Otherwise, things are just going to end up looking weird. In this instance though, they are indeed very posable, pretty much much everything you could want from a beast mode limb is present and accounted for, so there's posing aplenty to be had. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the back legs. Look, I can forgive a lot when it comes to this figure because beast modes aren't exactly easy, and this is a Legends figure, so there are plenty of limitations. Messy robot kibble inside the neck area? Sure, who cares? It's a Legends figure. Somewhat lackluster head rotation? Yeah, you still get a little bit here, and again, Legends figure. Visible hands on the front claws? Do I need to tap the sign again? No paint on the back? Dude, this figure already has a shit ton of paint, especially in the robot mode, and you're asking for more? Don't be greedy. I do feel that I should be a little bit greedy on the back legs though, because these do feel a smidge underdone. In their stock configuration, the shoulder armor locks in with the thighs, and as such completely negates any and all posability on the back legs. This means if you transform Lio Convoy correctly, he's permanently going to look knock-kneed. Now you can disengage the legs, which does indeed open up the back to be incredibly posable. Unfortunately, in the process, the actual beast body ends up being converted into a facade. There's no longer a proper state of flow back here. It doesn't look too bad if you're somewhat conservative with how you pose them, but go too far and the end result is pretty shit. Although to be honest, maybe this was the original intent from the designers because the connection tabs at the back here aren't really that good to begin with. Now don't get me wrong, I don't believe this is the absolute worst case of poor beast mode engineering I've ever seen, but when a half-assed redeco from nearly a decade and a half ago managed to circumvent this issue, albeit with a different transformation, this does seem a smidge messy. To me, this doesn't feel indicative of Iron Factory's newest endeavors. It feels more like some of the half-assed alt modes that plagued the company when they first started out. Granted, the sculpt work and plastic quality definitely blow these out of the water, but this beast mode is very close to being top tier, yet it unfortunately fails at the final step. Now that isn't to say I despise this alt mode, I still really like it. There's quite a bit to enjoy here, regardless of the minor flaws it has. I'm just a smidge disappointed that they weren't able to fully realize this design's potential. There are also a couple of things I can take issue with, but for me they aren't as pressing. First up, I feel the top panel is a little bit too small. I feel they could have easily balanced the robot mode kibble whilst still making it sit flush with the rest of the panels. As it is, it feels somewhat disjointed from the rest of the head. And secondly, the sword he comes with is slightly lacking in weapon functionality. Don't get me wrong, the design is lush, with the whole thing being coated in gold and gunmetal, and striking a very nice balance between traditional Japanese stylings and mechanical detail. Unfortunately, you only really get one peg. Both side skirts have a port for the sword to go, however the sword itself doesn't make use of any of that. It's a little more frustrating in the robot mode though, but honestly I still think it's a minor issue. I also would have liked to have seen some jaw functionality, as sadly there's no proper port for the sword to fit in the mouth, but that might have messed with the sculpt work, so I can easily let that slide. For me, the only thing I can really get frustrated about is the back section, and even then there's still a shit ton to like here. The engineering might not be up to the standard of recent Iron Factory figures, but by god everything else is. That's not to say he isn't fun to mess with, everything at the very least remains in place through average play, aside from the back legs. Now his stock articulation is pretty underwhelming, but not just for the back legs. Yes, they are frustrating, but to be honest the head isn't great either. Still, in this instance I can understand it. Lio Convoy isn't exactly the easiest figure to figure out the transformation for, especially in the head area. At the very least, props for them making the head pretty sturdy, especially at the size. The back section is a pretty bad joke though, as previously discussed. I'm not really sure why they made it this bad, to be honest. That being said, if you untab the legs, the articulation opens up quite a bit more, and doing so makes him one of the most posable beast modes I've seen recently. Granted, there hasn't exactly been much contest considering most examples have been pretty awful, but at the very least they did a good job for the size. And speaking of, he's actually quite close to your standard Hasbro Legends figure. You wouldn't expect him to be, given all the tiny details. They end up making him feel way smaller than he actually is, but nope, he's substantially sized, and it's pretty good. So yeah, faults and all, he's a decent little iron. Can't call it bad by any stretch of the imagination, just a teeny bit disappointing, but still very bloody good. Fortunately, at this point, we all know how this song and dance goes. Iron Factory figures, especially older ones, tend to have rather underwhelming vehicle modes, but when you get to their robot modes, oh ho ho! Oh ho ho! Okay, so have you ever seen a Lio Convoy transformation before? No, that doesn't count. No, that doesn't count either. Look, have you ever seen a classic Lio Convoy transformation before? Well, if you have, this is basically that with a bit of a different leg transformation. It's pretty much the same thing. Now, the first thing you want to do is come to the back here and untab the legs, and they are very difficult to get in there in the first place, which is another reason why I dislike this whole back section, but whatever, it happens. You then use the double hinges to get the legs into place like so. You take the hinge here and rotate the feet into place, and then you first want to get the back section out, then the front section out, otherwise it's just going to get stuck, and then you can rotate it around like so, and rotate the entire leg around like so as well. From here you want to take this panel at the top here and fold it into the lion head, then collapse that bit there, then temporarily bring these side panels up so you've got some more clearance, and bring this entire section out there, and this entire section out there. Come to the bottom, open up the chest, and that will allow you to bring the arms up like so, and then close the chest to lock them into place. And that will allow you to move the hip skirts down into position. But be careful, this section is a smidge fragile. You bring the arms down like so. Then after the arms are all oriented in its position, you rotate around and fold up the claws into the back. You then just kind of position the lion head into place. There's a bunch of hinges and stuff that will facilitate that, but really it's not that difficult. The instructions go over this incredibly complicated system of carefully getting everything into place, but it's a lion head on a bunch of struts. It's not that hard. Same thing for the left side. You just kind of unfold it and get it into place, and then it just sits there. You then rotate the tail so it kind of becomes a ribbon, and fold this whole section down. And last but not least, rotate the head around 180 degrees on the ball joint. And in the end, it's pretty simple, but pretty effective, and it is very much Lio Convoy, which I respect. They didn't have to follow the traditional Lio Convoy transformation scheme. They could have just done their own thing, but the fact that they adhered to what was there before, but in this new aesthetic, that's actually pretty cool, I have to admit. And in robot mode, wow! If we're talking about paint and sculpt work on a figure, I don't believe I've come across anything this year that has been done to this high a degree. If pure sex could be distilled into a Legends class figure, or at least the robot mode, then this would be the end result of that. Yes, I had my fair share of complaints about the lion mode, but damn if this doesn't make it all worth it. The head sculpt is incredibly fitting with many sharp angles and spiky bits. They've also got the double ear spikes too, which is quintessentially Lio Convoy. Really glad they went with this, when many previous examples just kind of omitted it and went for the general Optimus aesthetic, both official and otherwise. And holy shit, those yellow eyes really accentuate his ferocity. Sweet Jesus, this head sculpt makes the figure look poised for attack in every single instance. Moving down, the chest sculpt and paintwork are just as good as the head above them. They've actually gone for a similar aesthetic to the Perfect Effect version, albeit slightly more simplified considering the size. Gotta say though, looking at photos, I honestly think this looks better than said Perfect Effect version. The proportions I feel are just more natural in this instance. I can't be the only one who thinks this. And that's just their sculpt work. You get to their paint and damn, this thing has taken it to another level. Honestly, given the type of metallic paint they used here, I wouldn't be surprised if it was prone to paint chipping, but nope, completely durable. Seriously, how the f*** does Magic Square have problems with this, yet Iron Factory does something way more ambitious and manages to pull it off flawlessly? Guess that's just their experience in the field. Now, admittedly, the arms are pretty simple, but I feel that's best for them. The sculpt work is subtle, and the paintwork only does what it needs to, picking out the gunmetal joints and red sleeves. Had these been overcomplicated, they would have caused a somewhat cluttered aesthetic. Considering the main focuses on this figure are the chest and the shoulder kibble, pulling back here was a very smart decision. Now, unfortunately, you can't use the claw functionality of the original, but considering this isn't a one-for-one recreation of such, and considering that there's far better functionality elsewhere on the figure, I honestly don't mind one bit. Although there is one issue that I do take with the hands, but I'll get to that later, and honestly it's my only real gripe with this mode anyway, so for now, back to unfiltered praise. So, main event, the lion head. It's already expertly designed, but now the samurai armor aesthetic really helps it blend into the shoulder. Lio Convoy is already a pretty weird design when you really think about it, and the handling of this particular version is easily one of the most cohesive I've seen in plastic form. And none of this comes at the cost of any back kibble. Take a look back here and you'll quickly notice he's as clean as the new Wolfpack and Fearless Flyers album. Considering how weird of a transformation this character has in general, that's really f***ing commendable. But honestly, I actually find the handling of the top of the beast mode far cooler. Yes, for all the complaints I had about this element of the beast mode, what it turns into is really f***ing cool. Shoulder armor has always been a cool aesthetic, and the way this is done works on so many levels. The tail even ends up looking like a flowing ribbon. That's brilliant! But maybe you don't like the way it sits on the shoulder, maybe you want it to be more pronounced. Well, it actually has hinges for multiple stylings. You've got options, so whatever you like, you can go for it. Hell, don't like it at all? Fold it up into the back.
Simples.
And the detail just doesn't stop. The waist section combines awesome golden skirt armor with awesome white samurai pads and an awesome cod piece that rivals the likes of Flame Toy's Starscream. At least it doesn't stick out though. At first I was under the assumption that Lio was unable to move his legs forward, which did seem frustrating. Eventually though, I came across these hinges that actually unfold and allow the thighs to fully extend. And the best part of this is that they remain hidden within the thigh itself, so you're not left with any ridiculous joints exposed from the front. This is great, and it really speaks to what's possible with original designs, as opposed to following a specific source material. I know I criticized some of the engineering earlier, but at the end of the day, little details like this wouldn't be possible if the designers were locked into the IDW aesthetic, or something similar. similar. Original designs allow designers to really exercise their creative muscles, and I really want to see more of this, both official and unofficial. And finally, yeah, the lower legs are also amazing. Once again, awesome sculpt work, a shit ton of paint, and great articulation. I don't have anything specific to say here, but they are really good. To be honest, I've got 3 complaints with this robot mode, and 2 of them are incredibly negligible. First off, the crotch plate isn't glued in, it just kind of pops off, which is annoying but ignorable. It's not loose or anything, it's just weird. Secondly, again, the sword is a little frustrating. It only pegs into one side. Well, it does peg into both, but it doesn't work on the left. Nobody holds a sword like this. Yeah, I realize this sword's a little bit straighter than your traditional samurai sword, but if you turn it upside down, you have a lot of trouble actually withdrawing it from the sheath, so nobody does this. It's not a thing that...
Jesus f***ing Krebs, you're such a filthy weeb!
Yeah. I know. But again, that's honestly really negligible. Furthermore, the sword itself looks really f***ing cool. I absolutely love the silver and gold paint they've used here, and once again, it's incredibly durable. Also, really smart decision to leave the handle unpainted. Take that, paint chipping! Unfortunately, in the stock configuration, he can't really hold it, which brings me to the only issue that I feel actually has any merit. Like most Iron Factory figures, he comes with swappable hands for different posing options. You actually get quite a few, totaling at 4 whole sets, including the ones he has pre-installed. The stock hands remain in a closed fist configuration, and these are the only ones that actually work during transformation. Try anything else and you're just going to end up with clearance issues. Aside from those, you also get 2 open hands, 2 sword-holding hands at a perpendicular position, and 2 more sword-holding hands at a slightly angled position. The idea of giving 2 different styles of sword hands is actually quite brilliant, as it allows for so many different posing options. The problem lies with the execution. Every single hand assembly is on a ball socket and contains a posable claw. Seriously, why? First, the amount of wasted plastic here is ridiculous. Couldn't they have just had the hands pegged and unpegged separately, like most Iron Factory figures? This is so much wasted plastic that could have easily gone into the engineering. But that's not the kicker though, oh no. The problem with using a ball and socket is that over time, the process of swapping out is slowly going to loosen the ball joint. Eventually, these things are going to be floppy as shit. Hell, just from the review process, they've started to loosen a bit already. I suppose I should be glad it's just the hands and not a load-bearing elements like the thighs or the feet. But come on, this is just stupid. You had this figured out on most of your carbots already. Why did you have to f*** it up now? Still, 2 nitpicks and 1 proper flaw aren't enough to make me dislike this figure. The sculpt work is immaculate, the articulation is amazing, and the paintwork is second to none. Quite literally, I haven't come across a figure this well painted all year, and believe me, I've checked the list. Nothing in my collection from 2020 holds a candle to the design of this figure in robot mode, although I suppose that does make the shortcomings in beast mode even more frustrating. Oh well, what's done is done. His articulation isn't the best the line has to offer, but it's still to an incredibly high standard. I've seen many people complain about the lack of an ab crunch, but to be honest, considering how small the midriff area is, and considering the budget that went into making the paintwork, I don't really think it's necessary in this instance. Maybe we'll eventually get to the point where all legends have ab crunches, but at this stage, the general standard hasn't gotten to that level. As it stands, he's still incredibly well articulated, especially given the fact that he has to contend with a bunch of kibble. And again, size-wise, he's about the size of an average Hasbro Legends figure. Similarly to the beast mode, you wouldn't really think it, considering the somewhat slender physique and tiny details, but nope, that's the size he is. And when you consider the size, there's a lot of concessions that can be made. Not only is he already a Legends figure, but is far more slender than their previous offerings. Under those circumstances, pretty much everything except the beast mode engineering and the stupid hands can be forgiven. And at the end of the day, damn, that robot mode is good. Like, seriously, this is some real good shit. Honestly, the difference between putting a score on a figure and talking about your own personal opinion, there are differences between the two. Taking a look at everything this figure has done, I don't feel comfortable giving him a full 5 out of 5. But damn, he is close. Really ridiculously close. However, from a personal perspective, I absolutely love this figure. Legitimately, this might be one of my favorite Legends figures that I've received all year, and that's saying something considering what the other companies have put out. It's not as good as I would have hoped, but it's definitely good enough that I am very excited to see where this subline goes in the future. Ultimately, I'm very excited for the bludgeon that is to follow, and I hope that they continue this style for many figures to come. And in the end, if Iron Factory continues to keep up this level of quality, which we all know they will, then they're going to be around for a very long time. Oh no! I've wasted all of my money on a samurai sword! What have I done? If only I had purchased from today's sponsor instead, Robotoys. Robotoys specializes in Hasbro, Takara, third-party, and knockoff figures, so you've got a wide selection of items you could want to help keep you company in the current apocalypse. Don't forget, if you haven't already, use the code DrLock 10% off at the checkout for 10% off a single purchase. It's a one-time use code, so use it wisely. They were the ones who provided me with this current figure, and they're the ones who've actually provided me with most of my recent Iron Factory collection, because it's rather reasonably priced. And I know they're probably going to supply me with more Iron Factory shit in the future, so I'm gonna be with them for a while. But yeah, if you're an Aussie Transformers fan, check them out, and I'll see you in the future.